The ship that carried across the stars was cold and silent. He sat alone in a small room with metal walls and a single window that showed nothing but endless darkness. For 3 weeks, he had traveled through space, leaving behind everything he knew. Earth was now just a memory, a small blue dot lost somewhere in the black ocean of the universe. He thought about his sister, Ben. She was only 23 years old, but her body was failing her. The doctors had given her 2 years to live unless she received a treatment that cost more money than their family could earn in 10 lifetimes. When the aliens came to Earth looking for a human to marry their queen, saw his chance. He volunteered. In exchange, the Empire promised to heal his sister with their advanced medicine. It was a simple trade, his freedom for her life. He would make that trade 1,000 times without hesitation. The ship finally arrived at Prime, the heart of an empire that ruled half the galaxy. Looked through the window and saw a world unlike anything he had ever imagined. The planet glowed with soft purple light. Cities of crystal and silver stretched across its surface like veins of precious metal. Ships moved through the sky in perfect patterns, thousands of them, all working together like parts of a giant machine. Guards came to his room and escorted him out. They were tall beings with pale blue skin and eyes that shone like polished gold. They did not speak to him. They barely looked at him. To them he was cargo, a package to be delivered. The palace stood at the center of the capital city. It rose into the sky like a mountain made of glass, catching the light of 3 distant suns and breaking it into rainbows. Walked through doors that were 50 feet tall and entered a hall where the ceiling disappeared into clouds of soft light. Hundreds watched him. They stood in perfect rows on either side of a long path that led to a throne at the far end. Their faces showed nothing but cold curiosity. Some whispered to each other. He could not understand their words, but he understood their tone. They were laughing at him. The queen sat on her throne like a statue carved from moonlight. Her name was Lyra, and she was the most powerful being in this part of the universe. Her skin was pale silver. Her hair flowed like liquid darkness down her shoulders. Her eyes were the color of dying stars, deep red with flecks of gold. She was beautiful in a way that was almost frightening. Stopped at the base of the steps leading to her throne. He did not bow. He simply stood there and met her gaze. Lyra studied him for a long moment. Her expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Disappointment, perhaps, or boredom. "This is the human?" she asked. Her voice was cold and clear, like ice breaking on a winter lake. "Yes, Your Majesty," said a tall standing beside the throne. This was General, the commander of the Queen's armies. He looked at the way a person might look at an insect. He volunteered for the Union. His records show nothing remarkable. He was a soldier for a few years, then became a farmer. He grows vegetables. Quiet laughter rippled through the hall. Lyra rose from her throne and walked down the steps. She moved with the grace of flowing water, each step perfectly controlled. She stopped in front of and looked into his eyes. He was shorter than her by several inches. Among these tall, elegant beings, he looked small and plain. His black hair was simple and short. His face was ordinary. His clothes were the basic garments that had given him for the journey. "Why did you volunteer?" Lyra asked. "For my sister," said. His voice was calm and steady. "She is sick. Your people promised to save her. So you sold yourself for another's life." "I made a trade," corrected her. "There is a difference." Something changed in Lyra's expression. For just a moment she seemed almost interested. Then the cold mask returned. "Very well," she said. "Let us complete this ceremony." The wedding lasted 10 minutes. There were no celebrations, no music, no joy. A priest spoke words in a language did not understand. Lyra placed her hand over his, and a soft light wrapped around their wrists for a moment before fading away. And just like that, became the husband of an alien queen. That night servants led him to his chambers. The room was large and beautiful, filled with furniture that seemed to float above the floor. The bed was soft as clouds. The walls showed moving images of distant galaxies. But did not sleep. He stood by the window and looked out at the alien city. Ships flew past like shooting stars. Towers glowed with inner light. Somewhere out there, millions of beings lived their lives without knowing or caring that a human now walked among them. He thought about the ceremony. He thought about the way everyone had looked at him with contempt. He thought about Lyra's cold eyes and colder voice. They all believed they knew what he was. A primitive creature from a backward planet, a political tool, a joke. Smiled slightly in the darkness. Let them think that. On Earth, he had learned to hide. After what happened during his time as a soldier, after what he discovered about himself, hiding became necessary. The governments wanted to study him. The military wanted to use him. Scientists wanted to cut him open and learn his secrets. So he ran. He found a small farm in the mountains and grew vegetables for 7 years. He let the world forget about him. He became nobody. Now he was on a planet far from home, surrounded by beings who thought themselves superior to everything in the universe. They had no idea what slept inside the quiet human they had brought to their world. Pressed his hand against the cold glass of the window. He had not come here just for his sister, though he loved her more than his own life. He had felt something calling him, a whisper in his mind that had grown louder over the years. Something was coming. Something was about to change, and for reasons he did not fully understand, he needed to be here when it happened. Until then he would wait, he would watch, he would learn. And when the time came, he would show them all what a human could truly do. The 3 sons of Prime began to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Watched the light spread across the alien world and felt, for the first time in many years, that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. His new life had begun. 3 months passed like slow-moving clouds across an empty sky. Learned the rhythms of the palace. He learned when the servants woke and when they slept. He learned which corridors were busy and which were forgotten. He learned the names of the guards and the patterns of their patrols. Most importantly, he learned that no one cared what he did, as long as he stayed out of the way. Queen Lyra had not spoken to him since their wedding night. She ruled her empire from the Great Council chamber, meeting with generals and diplomats and leaders from 100 different worlds. Saw her sometimes, walking through the halls with her advisors, her silver robes flowing behind her like wings. She never looked at him. It was as if he did not exist. This suited him perfectly. He spent his mornings in the palace gardens. The gardens were vast, covering nearly a mile of carefully shaped land behind the main building. Strange flowers grew there, plants with colors that did not exist on Earth. Some glowed softly in the shade. Others sang quiet melodies when the wind touched them, walked among them slowly, learning their names, understanding how they grew. It reminded him of his farm. It reminded him of peace. One morning he met. She was human like him. A woman of about 30 with tired eyes and careful movements. She worked as a servant in the palace, one of several humans who had been brought to over the years for various reasons. She was cleaning the stone path near the singing flowers when approached. "You are new," she said in Korean, looking up at him with surprise. "The queen's husband, I have heard about you." "Good things, I hope," said. Laughed, but there was no happiness in the sound. "There are no good things said about humans here. We are considered barely more intelligent than animals." Sat down on a nearby bench. "How long have you been here?" 5 years. Returned to her cleaning, her hands moving automatically. "I was taken during one of their expeditions to Earth. They needed servants who could work in certain temperature conditions. Find our climate tolerance useful." "Do you miss home?" Was quiet for a long moment. Every day, but missing something does not bring it back. They talked for an hour that morning. Told him about the palace, about its dangers and secrets. She told him about the other humans who had come before him, the previous consorts who had married into nobility as part of political arrangements. Most of them died, she said quietly. Accidents, they called it. Some went mad from the loneliness and threw themselves from high places. One simply disappeared and was never found. She looked at with worried eyes. Be careful. This place is beautiful, but it is not kind. Nodded slowly. Thank you for warning me. Why did you come here? Asked. They say you volunteered. No human has ever volunteered before. I had my reasons. Studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she found there made her frown slightly. You are different from the others. I cannot explain how, but I feel it. Simply smiled and asked her to teach him the language. Over the following weeks became his teacher and his only friend. They met in the gardens every morning and she taught him words and phrases, grammar and pronunciation. Learned quickly. Too quickly perhaps, but did not ask questions. Meanwhile, the rest of the palace continued to treat him like a ghost. General was the worst. The tall military commander seemed to hate with a deep, personal anger. Perhaps it was because Lyra had been forced to marry a human. Perhaps had wanted her for himself. Whatever the reason, he made his feelings clear at every opportunity. During one council meeting, stood quietly in the corner, watching and listening as he often did. The council was discussing military movements near the border of their territory. Enemy ships had been spotted. Tensions were rising. Noticed watching and stopped mid-sentence. Why is the Queen's pet here? He demanded loudly. Every head in the room turned toward. Does it understand what we are discussing? Can it even count past 10? Laughter filled the chamber. Lyra sat at the head of the table, her face expressionless. She said nothing in his defense. Simply lowered his eyes and remained silent. Later walked past him in the corridor and deliberately knocked him against the wall. Know your place, human, the general whispered. You are nothing here, less than nothing. Steadied himself and watched walk away. His face showed no emotion, but behind his calm eyes he was recording everything. Every insult, every threat, every piece of information that might be useful later. That night, Lyra found him in the restricted archives. The archives were located deep beneath the palace, in chambers carved from solid crystal. They contained the collected knowledge of the Empire, millions of years of history and science and military strategy. Access was limited to the royal family and their highest advisors. The doors were sealed with genetic locks that could only be opened by those of blood. Yet there stood, reading a book of military history by the soft glow of floating lights. How did you get in here? Lyra demanded. Looked up calmly. The door was open. That is impossible. These locks are keyed to genetics. No human could bypass them. Closed his book and stood. Perhaps there was a malfunction. Lyra stepped closer. She was nearly a head taller than him, and she used her height to intimidate, looking down at him with narrowed eyes. What are you doing in here? Reading, said. I was curious about your history. You have accomplished great things. You can read our language. Has been teaching me. Lyra's eyes flickered with something that might have been surprise. You learned to read in 3 months. I have always been good with languages. They stood in silence for a long moment. Lyra studied his face, searching for lies, for hidden meanings. Simply waited, his expression as calm as still water. You are strange, Lyra finally said. You are nothing like what I expected. What did you expect? A simple creature, easily understood, easily ignored. Tilted his head slightly. I am sorry to disappoint you. Something changed in Lyra's eyes then. For the first time she looked at him not as a lesser being but as a puzzle she could not solve. It was a small shift, barely noticeable, but saw it. He had learned long ago that the first step to surviving in enemy territory was to make your enemy curious about you. Curiosity was a door, and was very good at walking through doors. Lyra turned and left without another word. But at the entrance to the archives, she paused and looked back at him over her shoulder. Had already returned to his book, apparently unconcerned with her presence. That night, Lyra ordered a quiet investigation into her husband's background. The results came back clean. He was exactly what his record said he was, a former soldier turned farmer with no special training or abilities. But Lyra had ruled her empire for 200 years. She had learned to trust her instincts. And her instincts told her that the quiet human in her palace was hiding something vast. The diplomatic banquet was the largest gathering of the year. Representatives from 40 different worlds came to the palace to celebrate the anniversary of the empire's founding. The great hall was filled with beings of every shape and size, all dressed in their finest clothing, all eager to win favor with the queen. Stood in his usual place, a quiet corner where he could watch without being noticed. He wore simple black clothes that Lyra's servants had given him. Compared to the brilliant colors and flowing fabrics around him, he looked like a shadow. He did not mind, shadows saw everything. The hall was beautiful that night. Floating crystals filled the air, each one glowing with soft light. Musicians played instruments that created sounds like nothing on earth, melodies that seemed to touch the soul directly. Food covered the long tables, dishes from 100 different worlds, some moving, some glowing, some singing as they were eaten. Lyra sat at the center of the head table, receiving guests with practiced grace. She smiled and spoke and played the role of the perfect ruler, watched her and noticed how her eyes never truly warmed, how her smiles never reached her heart. She was performing just as he was. Perhaps they were not so different after all. General stood behind the queen, his hand resting on his weapon. He scanned the crowd constantly, looking for threats. His golden eyes passed over without stopping. To him, the human was less dangerous than the serving dishes. This was his mistake. Had felt something wrong from the moment he entered the hall. It was a sensation he had learned to trust, a whisper in the back of his mind that warned him of danger. His body had begun to change years ago, and with those changes came abilities he was still learning to understand. One of them was this feeling, this awareness of things that had not yet happened. Something bad was coming. He could feel it like pressure in his chest. He began to move through the crowd, his eyes searching. The guests ignored him completely, stepping around him as if he were furniture. This made it easier to look, to listen, to notice the small details that did not fit. And then he found it. A servant carrying a tray of drinks. The servant was in appearance, but something was wrong with the way he moved. His steps were too stiff, his eyes were too focused, and on his wrist, hidden beneath his sleeve, was a small device that pulsed with faint red light. Understood immediately. He had seen similar devices during his time as a soldier on Earth. It was a trigger, and the servant was heading directly toward the queen's table. He began pushing through the crowd. People shouted at him. Guards moved to stop him, but was faster than they expected, slipping past their reaching hands like water through fingers. He was too late. The servant raised his hand. The device on his wrist flashed, and from vents hidden throughout the hall, green gas began to pour into the room. The effect was immediate and terrible. Guests collapsed where they stood, their bodies crumbling like puppets with cut strings. Guards fell next, their weapons clattering against the floor. The gas moved like a living thing, filling every corner, touching every face. General dropped to his knees, his golden eyes going dim. At the head table, Lyra tried to rise, but her legs failed her. She fell against her chair, her silver skin turning pale gray. The assassin walked toward her through the chaos, pulling a blade from beneath his clothes. He was not affected by the gas. His true skin was visible now, dark red and scaled. He was a member of the empire that had been at war with for centuries. "For the Dominion," he said, raising his weapon. A hand caught his wrist. Stood before him, completely unaffected by the gas that had brought down hundreds of others. The assassin stared at him with wide, disbelieving eyes. "That is not possible," the whispered. "This gas can kill anything that breathes, anything." Said nothing. He twisted his hand and the assassin's wrist broke with a sharp crack. The blade fell to the floor. Before the could scream, his other hand shot forward and struck his throat. The assassin collapsed, dead before he hit the ground. For a long moment, stood alone in the hall of fallen bodies. The gas was already beginning to fade, dispersing into the air. Around him, the first victims began to stir, their breathing returning to normal. Lyra looked up at him from her place on the floor. Her red eyes were wide with something he had never seen in them before. Fear and wonder. "How?" she managed to say. "I held my breath," said calmly. "The gas works through breathing. I simply did not breathe." "For how long?" "Long enough." The truth was more complicated. Had held his breath for 11 minutes. No normal human could survive even half that time without air, but had stopped being a normal human a long time ago. He reached down and helped Lyra to her feet. She was weak, leaning against him for support. Up close, she smelled like snow and starlight. "You killed him," she whispered, "with your bare hands. He was going to hurt you." Lyra stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. "Who are you?" Met her gaze steadily. "I am your husband, that is all that matters." The aftermath of the attack was chaos. Doctors rushed to treat the affected guests. Guards secured every entrance. General, once he recovered, ordered a complete lockdown of the palace and demanded to know how an assassin had infiltrated the banquet. But Lyra had other concerns. She ordered a full medical examination of. The doctors used every technology available to them, scanning his body down to the molecular level. They tested his blood, his bones, his brain. The results showed nothing unusual. By every measurement was an ordinary human male. "This is impossible," the head doctor told Lyra. "Based on these readings, he should have died within 3 minutes of exposure to the gas, yet he shows no signs of any effect at all." Lyra dismissed the doctor and stood alone in her chambers, staring out at the night sky. Her thoughts moved like storms. She had watched walk through poison that could kill any known species. She had watched him move with speed that should have been impossible. She had watched him kill a trained assassin in seconds. And yet every test said he was just a simple human. The next day she found him in the garden, tending to the singing flowers as if nothing had happened. She approached him slowly, uncertain of what to say. "I owe you my life," she finally said. Looked up at her. "You owe me nothing. I did what any husband would do." "No other husband could have done what you did." Lyra knelt beside him among the flowers. It was the first time she had ever lowered herself to his level. "I need to know the truth. What are you?" Was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft and sad. "If I told you the truth, you would not believe me, and if you did believe me, you would be afraid." He turned back to the flowers. "It is better this way, better that I am just a human, better that I am nothing special." Lyra watched him work. His hands were gentle with the delicate plants, careful and patient. These were not the hands of a killer, and yet she had seen those same hands break a man's neck without hesitation. "I am not afraid of you," she said quietly. Looked at her, and for a moment she saw something ancient in his eyes, something vast and tired and older than stars. "You should be," he said. Then the moment passed, and he was just again, the quiet human who tended flowers and asked for nothing. But Lyra understood now that she had never truly seen him at all. The warning came at midnight. Sensors at the edge of space detected something massive approaching. At first, the operators thought it was an asteroid field, a cluster of rocks drifting through the darkness. Then the rocks changed direction, and everyone understood the terrible truth. It was a fleet, the largest fleet anyone had ever seen. 10,000 warships flew in perfect formation. their engines burning like angry stars. At the center of the formation was a ship so large it blocked out entire sections of space, a mobile fortress that carried the flag of the Dominion. Emperor had finally come. The Dominion had been the enemy of the Empire for over 1,000 years. The two powers had fought countless battles, each one ending in stalemate or temporary truce, but was different from the rulers who came before him. He was patient, he was cunning, and he had spent the last century building an armada that could finally destroy the Forever. The failed assassination at the banquet had been his message. Now the war itself had arrived. Queen Lyra stood in the command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the approaching enemy. Her generals argued around her, their voices rising in panic. "We have only 7,000 ships," General said, his face pale with fear. "They outnumber us nearly 2-1. If we fight, we will lose." "If we surrender, we will be destroyed anyway," another general replied. "Does not take prisoners, he burns worlds." "Then we must evacuate the civilian population and prepare for siege warfare." "There is no time. They will be here in 3 days." Lyra listened to them argue, her face showing nothing. Inside, her heart was filled with a cold dread she had not felt in centuries. She had ruled her empire through wisdom and strength, but no amount of wisdom could change simple mathematics. 10,000 ships would crush 7,000. The empire would fall. And then what? Would march through the galaxy, burning everything in his path. Every world under protection would be destroyed. Billions of lives would end. "Enough," she said quietly. The room fell silent. "Begin preparation for battle. We will meet them at the threshold, the narrow passage near the twin moons. The terrain will limit their numerical advantage." "It will not be enough," said. "I know," Lyra turned away from the displays, "but we will fight anyway. That is what we do." She walked through the corridors of her palace, past guards who saluted her with worried eyes, past servants who whispered prayers as she passed. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone understood that the end might be near. Lyra found in his chambers, standing by the window as he often did, watching the ships prepare for war in the night sky. "You know what is happening," she said. "Yes," did not turn around. "They have come. I am ordering all non-military personnel to evacuate. You will be sent to a safe world beyond the battle zone." Now turned. His face was calm, but something burned in his eyes. "No." Lyra stared at him. "That was not a request. I am your queen. You will obey." "You are my wife," replied, "and I did not come here to run away when danger arrives." "You are a human. What could you possibly do against an armada?" Walked toward her slowly. With each step, something seemed to change in the air around him. The temperature dropped. The light grew dim. And Lyra felt, for the first time in her long life, that she was standing before something far more powerful than herself. "I need to tell you something," said. "Something I should have told you from the beginning, about Earth, about what humans truly are." "What do you mean?" Stopped in front of her. He was still shorter than her, still plain and ordinary in appearance, but his eyes held depths that seemed to go on forever. "Everything you think you know about my species is wrong," he said. "We are not primitive creatures who evolved on a simple planet. We were made, created, designed to be something far more than what we appear." Lyra felt her heart beating faster. Designed by whom? "We call them the architects. They were an ancient race, older than any civilization in this galaxy. They traveled the universe creating life, shaping worlds, building wonders that still cannot be explained." Paused. "And on Earth, they created their greatest experiment, us." "Why would an ancient race create humans?" His expression grew dark. "Because they needed weapons. The architects were at war with something, enemies so terrible that their normal soldiers could not defeat them. So they designed a new kind of warrior, a being that could adapt to any environment, survive any danger, and become more powerful the more it was challenged." "You are saying humans are living weapons?" I am saying we have the potential to be. The architects built the capacity into our genes, then locked it away, waiting for the right trigger to awaken it. Most humans live and die without ever knowing what sleeps inside them. Looked down at his own hands. But some of us are different. Some of us have been awakened. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. You. Yes, met her eyes. When I was a soldier, I was sent on a mission to explore a hidden place on Earth. We found an architect ruin, a chamber that had been sealed for millions of years. When I touched the walls, something happened. Something woke up inside me that had been sleeping since the beginning of my species. What are you capable of? I do not fully know. My body adapts to whatever threatens it. My mind processes information faster than any computer. I can heal from wounds that would kill any other being. And when I focus deeply enough, I can feel the energy that holds matter together and change it with my thoughts. The words hung in the air between them. Lyra struggled to understand what she was hearing. Everything she knew about the universe, about the races that filled it, about the hierarchy of power, was being turned upside down. Why did you hide this? She asked finally. Because on Earth they wanted to control me, study me, use me as a tool. His voice was tired and old. I spent years running and hiding, pretending to be ordinary. When the chance came to leave Earth, I took it. I thought I could start again, be nobody in a place where no one knew what I was. Then why tell me now? Look toward the window where the lights of warships filled the sky. Because your enemy has come and I am tired of hiding. I am tired of watching good people suffer while I do nothing. He turned back to her. I am not asking to command your armies. I am asking to fight beside you, as your partner, as your husband. Lyra studied the man before her. He looked so small, so human, so unremarkable. And yet she had seen him walk through poison gas and kill an assassin with his bare hands. She had seen the ancient depths in his eyes. Was it possible? Could this quiet farmer truly be a weapon that even the architects had feared? If you have this power, she said slowly, why have you not used it? Why grow vegetables on a farm? Why let my people insult and mock you? Smiled, and for a moment he looked unbearably sad. Because power without control is destruction. I spent too many years learning to kill. I needed to remember how to be gentle, how to create instead of destroy. He reached out and took her hand. His fingers were warm and rough from garden work. But now creation must wait. Now I must become what I was made to be. Lyra looked at their joined hands. A queen and a human farmer. It should have been ridiculous. It should have been impossible. But war was coming, and impossible was all they had left. Show me, she said. Show me what you can do. Nodded, and in his eyes, something that had been sleeping for a very long time began to wake up. They stood in the training chamber beneath the palace, a vast room designed for combat practice. The walls were made of a metal so strong that even ship weapons could not damage it. The floor was bare stone from centuries of battles. Lyra had dismissed everyone else. Only she remained. Show me, she said again. Closed his eyes. For a long moment, nothing happened. He simply stood there, breathing slowly, like a man preparing for meditation. Then his body began to change. It started with his skin. A faint glow appeared beneath the surface, like light shining through thin paper. The glow spread across his arms, his chest, his face growing brighter with each passing second. His muscles shifted under his skin, becoming denser, more defined. His posture changed, becoming that of a predator ready to strike. When he opened his eyes, they were no longer human. They burned with silver fire like captured stars. Watch the targets, he said. On the far side of the chamber, training dummies stood in a row. They were made of reinforced material designed to withstand energy weapons. Raised his hand. The air around his fingers began to ripple and twist. And then, faster than Lyra could follow, he moved. One moment he was standing beside her. The next, he was on the other side of the room. The training dummies exploded one after another, torn apart by forces she could not see. The sound was like thunder, like worlds breaking. It took 3 seconds. All 12 dummies were destroyed. Turned to face her. The silver light in his eyes faded slowly, returning to their normal human brown. The glow beneath his skin dimmed and disappeared. He looked ordinary again, tired perhaps, but ordinary. "The architects called us Apex," he said quietly. "The highest point of their creation, designed to adapt, to evolve, to become whatever was needed to survive and win." Lyra struggled to find words. She had ruled an empire that spanned thousands of star systems. She had seen wonders and terrors beyond counting, but she had never seen anything like what she had just witnessed. "How is this possible?" she whispered. Walked back toward her slowly. "Human DNA is unique. It contains millions of sequences that appear to do nothing, what Earth scientists call junk DNA. But it is not junk. It is a library, a collection of adaptations waiting to be activated. When an apex awakens, those sequences begin to unlock. And the more you face danger, the more powerful you become. Yes, the architects designed us to grow stronger through struggle. Every threat I survive teaches my body something new. Every challenge makes me more." Lyra thought about the assassination attempt, about the poison gas that should have killed him. The gas at the banquet, your body adapted to it. Within seconds of exposure, my cells began producing chemicals to neutralize it. By the time I reached the assassin, I was immune. Looked at his hands. I did not even have to think about it. It just happened. "Are there others like you on Earth?" "There must be. The awakening seems to be triggered by extreme experiences, moments of great danger or contact with architect technology. Most humans who experience these things die, but some survive and change." Paused. "The governments of Earth know about us. They have been hunting Apex for decades, trying to control or eliminate us before we become a threat." "A threat to whom?" "To them, to the order they have built." His voice held an old bitterness. "They are afraid of what we might become, afraid of what it means for power to rest in individuals rather than institutions." Lyra understood that fear. She had felt it herself moments ago when she watched destroy those targets with nothing but his will. A being with that power could threaten everything she had built. But she was also a ruler who had survived 200 years of enemies and plots. She knew that power itself was not the danger. The danger was how power was used. "Why did you not fight back against them?" she asked. "With abilities like yours, you could have done anything." His expression grew heavy with memory. "When I first awakened, I was young and angry. I had lost friends in the mission where it happened. I blamed the people who sent us there, the generals who treated soldiers like tools." He paused. "I did terrible things. I destroyed facilities, killed men who were only following orders. I became a monster." "What stopped you?" "My sister." A small smile crossed his face. "Bin was just a child then. She did not understand what I had become or what I had done. She only knew that her brother was home and she was happy." His eyes grew distant. "I looked at her innocent face and realized what I was becoming, a weapon without purpose, a destroyer without meaning. So I stopped. I ran away, found a quiet place, and tried to become human again." Lyra moved closer to him. They stood only a few feet apart now. "And now, what are you now?" "I am still figuring that out," met her gaze. "But I know one thing. I did not come here by accident. Something called me, pulled me across the stars to this place, this moment. I believe I am supposed to be here. I believe I am supposed to help you." "Why? What do you care about my empire?" "I do not care about your empire." His voice was gentle but honest. "I care about the people who will die if wins. I care about the worlds he will burn. And I care about you, Lyra, more than I expected to." Lyra felt something shift in her chest. For 3 months she had ignored this man, dismissed him, treated him as less than a servant. And all that time he had been watching her, learning her, perhaps even growing to love her. "I have not been kind to you," she said. "No, but you have not been cruel either. You have been a queen doing what she believes is necessary." Reached out and touched her face gently. His hand was warm against her cool silver skin. "I understand duty. I understand sacrifice. And I understand that sometimes we build walls around our hearts to protect ourselves from pain." "What makes you think I have walls?" "Because I have them too." They stood in silence for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then Lyra stepped back. "The fleet will arrive in 2 days. Even with your power, I do not see how we can win. One apex against 10,000 ships. Then we must find another way." Eyes grew sharp with thought. "Himself, he is on that fleet, yes, on the command ship." "Yes, he always leads his forces personally. It is his greatest strength and his greatest weakness." "Then he is the key. An army without a leader becomes chaos. Kill the head and the body dies." Lyra shook her head. "His command ship is the most protected vessel in their fleet. Thousands of soldiers guard him. Energy shields surround the ship in layers. No attack force could break through." "An attack force could not." His lips curved into a small smile. "But what about one man?" "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious." Began to pace, his mind clearly working through possibilities. "Your fleet engages theirs. The battle draws their attention outward. I take a small ship, slip through the chaos and get inside's vessel. I find him. I end him. The war stops before it truly begins." "That is suicide." "For anyone else, yes. For me?" Stopped packing and looked at her with those ancient eyes. "I have been shot, stabbed, poisoned, burned, and drowned. Each time my body learned and adapted. Each time I came back stronger. I do not know if I can die at all anymore." Lyra wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that he was being foolish, that no single being could do what he was suggesting. But she had seen him walk through poison gas. She had watched him destroy metal targets with a wave of his hand. Maybe, just maybe, this impossible plan could work. "I cannot ask you to do this," she said. "You are not asking. I am offering." Walked toward the exit of the training chamber. "Let me do what I was made to do, Lyra. Let me protect the people I have come to care about." He paused at the door and looked back at her. "And when this is over, when is dead and your empire is safe, perhaps we can start again. Perhaps we can be the partners we were supposed to be." He left before she could respond. Lyra stood alone in the empty chamber, surrounded by the wreckage of destroyed training dummies. She thought about war and sacrifice. She thought about the quiet human who had walked into her life and turned everything upside down. And for the first time in a very long time, she prayed to God she had stopped believing in centuries ago. The fleet arrived like a plague of iron and fire. 10,000 warships filled the space around Prime, their hulls dark as dried blood, their weapons glowing with hungry energy. At the center of the formation sat the command ship, a vessel 3 miles long that bristled with enough firepower to destroy a planet. On the bridge of that ship, Emperor watched the defense force with cold amusement. His body was massive, nearly 9 feet tall, covered in thick red scales that could stop most weapons. His eyes burned with orange flame. He had conquered 100 worlds and killed millions with his own hands. 7,000 ships, he said to his commanders. They actually think they can fight. Should we demand surrender, Emperor? One commander asked. No, today we send a message to the entire galaxy. The Empire ends here. The battle began. Lyra commanded her fleet from the flagship Golden Dawn, her hands moving across holographic controls as she directed thousands of ships. She had positioned her forces near the threshold, a narrow channel of space between 2 massive moons. The terrain limited how many ships could attack at once. It was a good strategy. It bought them time, but it would not be enough. Ships exploded on both sides. The darkness of space filled with fire and debris. Energy beams crossed like deadly lightning. For every vessel destroyed, 2 ships fell. The mathematics had not changed. They were still losing. "Hold the line," Lyra commanded. "Give him time." General stood beside her, his face grim. He did not know the full plan. He only knew that the Queen had ordered a single fighter to launch during the chaos of battle, heading directly toward the enemy formation. "Your Majesty, that ship will be destroyed in seconds," he said. "Whoever is on it is already dead." Lyra said nothing. Her eyes were fixed on a small dot moving through the storm of war. "Flew through hell." His fighter was a simple craft, barely armed, designed for speed rather than combat. Enemy fire filled the space around him like rain in a thunderstorm. Ships larger than mountains tried to crush him as he passed, but moved as if he could see the future. His enhanced mind processed the movement of 10,000 ships simultaneously. He saw patterns in the chaos, openings that lasted for fractions of a second. His hands moved on the controls with impossible precision, guiding his tiny ship through gaps that should not have existed. Explosions blossomed around him. A destroyer fired directly at his position, spun his ship sideways and passed through the beam, missing death by inches. Ahead, the command ship grew larger. It was surrounded by hundreds of defense vessels, all focused on protecting their emperor. Their weapons created a wall of destruction that nothing could survive. Did not slow down. He pushed his ship to maximum speed and aimed directly at the command ship's hull. At the last moment, he ejected from the cockpit. His body flew through the vacuum of space. Any normal being would have died instantly. The cold would freeze their blood. The lack of pressure would tear their body apart. The radiation would cook them from the inside. Felt nothing. His cells had already adapted, creating a protective layer that sealed in heat and pressure, filtering the radiation before it could do harm. His heart slowed to almost nothing, conserving oxygen. His mind remained clear and focused. He struck the hull of the command ship at incredible speed. His body punched through the metal like a bullet through paper, and he landed in a corridor filled with soldiers. They stared at him in shock, a human standing inside their ship, alive. "Kill it," their commander shouted. Weapons fired. Energy beams struck his body and dissipated like water hitting stone. Bullets flattened against his skin and fell to the floor. The soldiers charged with blades drawn. Moved. What happened next would become legend across 100 star systems. Later, those who survived would struggle to describe what they had seen. They would speak of a demon in human form, a creature that moved like wind and struck like lightning. Flowed through the soldiers like water through rocks. His hands became weapons, each strike perfect, each movement efficient. Warriors fell before they could react, their bodies breaking against his power. He moved down corridor after corridor, leaving destruction behind him. Doors sealed in his path and he walked through them. Turrets emerged from walls and he destroyed them with waves of force. Elite guards surrounded him and he scattered them like leaves in a storm. The ship began to panic. Alarms screamed. Commanders shouted orders that no one could follow. Soldiers ran in all directions, some trying to stop the invader, others simply trying to escape. Through it all moved forward, always forward, toward the bridge. Emperor received reports of the intruder with growing disbelief. One single being was tearing through his ship like it was made of paper. Impossible. Nothing could do that. Nothing in the galaxy had that kind of power. "Seal the bridge," he commanded. "All guards to defensive positions." The bridge doors were 3 feet of solid metal, reinforced with energy shields. 100 of his best warriors stood between those doors and their emperor. It was not enough. The doors exploded inward. The guards opened fire with everything they had: energy, bullets, explosives, everything. When the smoke cleared, stood in the entrance. His clothes were torn and burned. His skin showed no marks at all. He looked at Emperor with eyes that burned silver. "This is impossible," whispered. "Nothing is impossible," said. "There are only things that have not happened yet." Rose from his command throne. He was a giant, covered in armor made from the bones of his enemies. In his hand, he held a weapon that had killed hundreds of opponents in single combat. "I am Emperor of the Dominion. I have conquered worlds with these hands. I have crushed armies beneath my feet." He raised his weapon. "What are you?" I am human, and I am here to end your war." Attacked with all his strength, his weapon swung with enough force to split a ship in half. Caught it with one hand. For a moment they stood frozen, strength against strength, then twisted his arm and the weapon shattered. The fight lasted 47 seconds. Was a skilled warrior. He had trained his entire life for combat. He knew techniques that could break any defense and find any weakness. None of it mattered. Moved around every attack. He struck with precise, efficient force. Each hit broke something, cracked something, damaged something. His armor fell away piece by piece. His defenses crumbled. In the end, the Emperor of the Dominion fell to his knees before a human farmer from Earth. Stood over him ready to deliver the final blow. One strike would end it. One death would save millions. But he hesitated. "Yield," he said quietly. "Call off your fleet. Surrender and I will let you live." Looked up at him with burning hatred. "You think I will surrender to a creature from a primitive world? I would rather die." "Then your people die with you, your fleet, your soldiers, all of them destroyed because of your pride." Something flickered in his eyes, not fear of death but something else. He looked past to the screens showing the battle outside. His ships were in chaos. Without orders from their emperor, they had begun to break formation. They were pushing forward. "If you kill me, my generals will fight to the last ship," said. "I know, that is why I am offering you a choice." Stepped back and opened a communication channel. His voice broadcast across all frequencies, reaching every ship in both fleets. "This is of Earth, speaking from the bridge of the command ship. Your emperor is defeated. He kneels before me as I speak. The war is over. Any vessel that does not withdraw immediately will be destroyed. Any commander who continues fighting will share their emperor's fate." Silence followed. Then slowly the ships began to turn. One by one they broke away from the battle and retreated toward open space. On the golden dawn, Lyra watched with tears in her eyes. She had prepared to die today. She had prepared to watch her empire fall. Instead, she watched a miracle. Looked down at one final time. "Go home. Rule your people in peace. If you ever threaten this region of space again, I will come for you, and next time I will not offer mercy." He turned and walked off the bridge, leaving the broken emperor behind. The Battle of Prime was over, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the days that followed, the galaxy asked a single question: what are humans? Before the Battle of Prime, Earth was considered a primitive backwater, a small blue planet filled with creatures barely more advanced than animals. The Empire had chosen a human bride for their queen as a political joke, a way to satisfy an old law without giving any real power to an outsider. Now everything had changed. Reports of what happened spread across 1,000 worlds. A single human had walked through poison gas without harm. He had survived the vacuum of space. He had torn through an entire warship with his bare hands. He had defeated the most powerful warrior in the Dominion in single combat. Ambassadors sent messages demanding explanations. Scientists requested samples for study. Military commanders wondered how many more of these beings existed on that small blue planet. Lyra held a council meeting to address the situation. The Great Hall was filled with generals, advisors, and representatives from allied worlds. They all spoke at once, their voices rising in a storm of confusion and fear. "We must study the humans, learn their secrets. We should isolate Earth, contain the threat before it spreads. If there are more of these apex beings, we need to find them, control them. General stood and slammed his fist on the table. The human is dangerous. Today he saved us, but tomorrow he could destroy us. We must. Enough. Lyra's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The room fell silent. There will be no study of humans against their will, no containment, no control. She rose from her throne and looked at each face in the room. I have spent 3 months ignoring my husband, treating him as less than a person, and all that time he could have taken power from me whenever he wished. Instead, he tended my gardens. He learned my language. He became part of my household. Your Majesty, I am not finished. Lyra's eyes burned with authority. Could have killed Emperor, he could have taken the fleet for himself. He could have made himself ruler of half the galaxy with one decision. She paused. Instead, he offered mercy. He ended the war with as little death as possible. That is not the act of a monster. That is the act of a man who understands the true weight of power. She stepped down from her throne and walked to the window. Outside, the 3 suns of Prime were setting, painting the crystal spires in shades of gold and purple. I am going to tell our people the truth about Earth, the truth about what humans truly are, not as a warning but as a sign of hope. Hope asked, confused. The architects created them as weapons, yes, but weapons can protect as well as destroy. And the apex, the awakened humans, they are proof that beings can hold terrible power and still choose to be kind. Lyra turned back to face the council. That is a lesson worth teaching to the entire galaxy. The official announcement came 3 days later. Lyra spoke to her empire through holographic broadcasts that reached every corner of space. She told them about the architects, about the sleeping potential in human DNA, about the apex who had saved their world. The response was mixed. Some were afraid, others were fascinated, a few were inspired. But one reaction mattered more than all the others. On Earth, in a small hospital room, Bin watched the broadcast with wide eyes. She had been receiving treatment for months now. The alien medicine was doing its work, repairing the damage to her body cell by cell. She was still weak, but she was alive. She would live. The doctors had told her that her brother was well, that he had become important somehow in the distant empire that had taken him. But she had not understood what that meant until now. She whispered, watching the images of her brother on the screen. He stood beside the beautiful Silver Queen, looking small but somehow more present than anyone else in the room. What happened to you? She did not have all the answers, but she knew one thing for certain. Her brother had always been different. Even as a child, he had been too quiet, too watchful, too patient. Their parents had worried about him. Their neighbors had avoided him. Only Bin had seen past the strangeness to the gentle heart underneath. Now the entire universe knew what she had always sensed. Her brother was special, and he had used that specialness to save countless lives. She smiled through her tears and pressed her hand against the screen, as if she could reach across the stars to touch him. Meanwhile on Prime, life slowly returned to normal. The army stood down, the damaged ships were repaired, the dead were honored and mourned, and in the palace gardens returned to his flowers. Lyra found him there on the morning after her announcement. He was kneeling in the dirt, carefully transplanting a small seedling from one pot to another. His hands were gentle and patient, treating the tiny plant like it was the most precious thing in the universe. "The entire galaxy is talking about you," she said. "They call you the human who ended the war, the architect's weapon, the silver storm." "I know," did not look up from his work. "I have been trying to ignore it." Lyra smiled and knelt beside him. Her silver robes touched the dirt, something that would have horrified her servants if they had seen it. "You could rule half the galaxy," she said. "With your power, no one could stop you." "I know that too," finally looked at her. His eyes were warm and tired and full of something that might have been peace. "Do you know why I grew vegetables for 7 years?" "Tell me." Because I spent too many years destroying things. After I awakened, after I did all those terrible things I told you about, I felt empty inside, broken. I needed to remember how to make something grow. He touched the small plant with his finger. Power means nothing if you do not know what to do with it, and the most important thing anyone can do with power is choose not to use it. Lyra considered this. She thought about her 200 years as queen, about all the times she had chosen war instead of peace, control instead of trust. She had always believed that strength meant crushing your enemies and dominating those weaker than you. Showed her another way. True strength was gentleness when you could be terrible, patience when you could be fast, mercy when you could be cruel. "What happens now?" she asked. Stood and brushed the dirt from his hands. "Now we build something new, together." Together, Lyra tested the word. It felt strange in her mouth. She had ruled alone for so long. "I am not going to take over your empire," said with a small smile. "I am not even sure I want to leave this garden, but I am here, Lyra, for as long as you want me, as your partner, as your friend, as your husband if you will have me." Lyra stood and faced him. She was taller than him, more powerful in the traditional sense, older by almost 2 centuries. By every measure of society, she should have looked down on him. Instead, she reached out and took his hand. "I would like that," she said. "I would like that very much." They stood together in the garden as the 3 suns rose higher in the sky. Around them, alien flowers sang their quiet songs. Distant ships flew across the heavens. An empire waited for its queen. But for this moment, there was only the 2 of them. A queen and a human farmer, the most powerful woman in the galaxy and a man who chose to grow vegetables. It was, perhaps, the strangest partnership in the history of the universe. And it was only the beginning. Far away, across the endless void of space, Earth turned slowly in its orbit around a single yellow sun. 7 billion humans lived their lives without knowing what slept inside them, what potential waited in their genes, what power they might one day awaken. But someday they would learn. Someday the call would come, just as it had come for, and when that day arrived, humanity would take its place among the stars. Not as conquerors, not as weapons, but as partners, as builders, as the gentle hand that helped the universe grow. In the Palace of Prime, Queen Lyra and her husband walked hand in hand through the crystal corridors, planning a future neither had expected, but both had come to want. And outside, the stars burned on, watching and waiting as they always had and always would, for the next chapter of an endless story. The end.